Hello, everyone. So happy to see so many of you here, whether it's morning, nighttime, wherever you are. We're going to give everyone just a couple minutes just to get connected to video, audio, and we will see you all in just a second. My name is Laura. I am a virtual host here with TNN. I've been doing these for many years now, so I'm super excited for this particular conversation, as it looks like all of you are too, since you're all here. So welcome. Before we get started, what I always like to do is just ask a question. So my question today is, if you could hop on a plane to go anywhere in Europe and move there, where would you go? So if you can open up the chat box and drop that in, that would be fun for us to see where your destination would be. Okay, so I am going to actually introduce Lisa, who is our lovely I want to say owner of TNN, but she has continued to bring this community together, and she is the one who's behind these events and the tours and everything else that makes the Nomadic Network so wonderful. So Lisa, why don't you start, give a quick intro about yourself. We'll do some housekeeping items, and then we'll turn it over to Cepee, our presenter for today. And Lisa, while you're doing that, I'm going to share my screen just so we can go through some of the details.
Love it. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Good morning from Portland, Oregon. That's where I am. This is a packed house today. This is a very important topic coming up, and we're so excited about this. I wanted to tell you a little bit about me. I'm Lisa. I am the owner of the Nomadic Network. The Nomadic Network was founded in 2019, and over the years, we have built up an incredible community of travel enthusiasts. Whether you've lived abroad, have traveled for ages all over the world, or have always dreamed of traveling, what really brings us together is our shared love of travel. And we have created such an incredible community. We have hosted over 250 virtual events now. And what we do is basically two things. We host unique, one-of-a-kind small group tours to locations all over the world with like-minded travelers like yourself. And we also work hard to bring you valuable and educational information through these free events. We've got tours this year to incredible places like India, Vietnam, Greece, Morocco, and Peru. And you are welcome to follow us on any of these channels, Instagram, YouTube, as well as register for any future events, which you can find through our website. And of course, you are super welcome to join us on any of our community tours. So, some event reminders, just a little bit of housekeeping here. We love it when you turn your video on. It's so nice to see your smiling face. Please stay muted. Use the chat to connect with your fellow attendees and ask questions. Type question before your question, and we'll make sure to ask the speaker at the end. Today, I know we're going to have quite a few questions. Please follow our speakers and support them. They are volunteers doing this out of the kindness of their hearts to share their passion with you. So give them the support that they deserve. So let's learn, let's have fun, and enjoy this time together. So, but without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker today. The topic is how Americans can move to Europe. Cepee sold all of her belongings at the age of 35, and moved to Spain in 2015, and she has never looked back. Now she dedicates her life to helping other women hit refresh with her company. She hit refresh. She has a community of over 15,000 women over 30 years old. She helps women transform their lives by moving abroad, by providing guidance, support, resources, and inspiration. She does this all through her Move Abroad After 30 masterclass, her membership community, her podcast, annual retreats, her book, and more. Her programs have been featured in Forbes, the New York Times, USA Today, and Business Insider. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Cepee.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lisa. Great. Everybody can hear me, see me okay? Fabulous. All right, I'm going to share my screen here, and I just want to thank everyone for taking the time also for joining me today. I know it's early for you. It's 6 p.m. for me. I am in Spain right now, but thank you for taking time out of probably your work day to be here. I appreciate it. Let me just get my screen up here to share. All right, I want to pick the right one and not the wrong one. Okay, there we go. All right, can everyone see my screen okay? Fabulous. All right, I'm gonna get started. We have a lot to go over today, and I definitely wanna leave enough time for questions. So let's do this. Today, we're really gonna be focusing on the biggest challenge that comes to moving abroad for most people, and that's visas, all right? But today I'll give a little more context about who I am. Even though Lisa did a fabulous job there, we're gonna talk about debunking some of the common myths to moving to Europe. Why Europe? I probably don't need to tell you because I think you guys want to be there and you know why. Then the bulk of today, we're going to spend on those visas, the different visa options that you have. And there's a lot. I'll touch very briefly on easiest countries to move to because I get that question a lot. And then what to know. Again, I'll talk briefly about a few things that people often ask when it comes to housing and the housing crisis, healthcare, taxes. We'll talk briefly about that. Okay? So as Lisa said, my name's Cepee, and I help women age 30 and over transform their lives by moving abroad. I know there's men on the call here, so you are welcome to be here. The information I'm sharing today is applicable to anybody, but I specifically work with my programs with women over 30. I fell in love with, I had the travel bug when I was 17. I'm very transparent with my age, so I'm 44 now. 97, I took my first trip abroad, and I moved to Spain almost 10 years ago and founded She Hit Refresh, which is my company along the way. And I'm talking about visas today, and I'll tell you a little bit about my visa guide. I did write the #1 visa guide to living in Europe out there, where you can find more information about some of the visas we'll talk about today. Just high level, people are often curious, like how I was able to make my move. I always say it's never been easier to move abroad, especially to Europe, than it is now. When I made my move, a lot of the visas we'll look at didn't even exist yet. So I moved to Spain on a student visa to teach English. I got very lucky a year later. I moved here in 2015. Got very lucky and had a work visa sponsorship. I then worked as a freelancer on something called a non-lucrative visa. Now, if you're a freelancer, that would be a digital nomad visa. And now I've become a Spanish citizen. So just to show, like I've lived here in many different contexts on many different visas. So there's lots of ways to do this, not just one way. All right, debunking some of the myths out there. So a lot of people think like, oh, well, I can't move to Europe unless, a lot of people think you got to have money, you have to be rich, you have to marry a foreigner, like that's the only way in. You have to get transferred with a job, or you have to teach English. Like these are the only ways. And maybe, I would say maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, you were limited to some of these options because it was difficult for the average person to move to Europe and find a job. But the world has really changed, and it's changed a lot since 2020, since the pandemic, because of two things. One is the rise of remote work. So now it's much more possible for people to be mobile and work in other places because they don't have to rely on finding a job in country. They can bring a remote job with them. And the other reason why is just there's so many more visas now, especially these digital nomad visas that they just didn't exist before 2020. So you've probably heard a lot more. Maybe you're seeing a lot more news features and articles about moving abroad. And I think, that is because there's just so much more interest because it is so much more possible now. So if you want to move to Europe, I think you are in a great time to do that. So let's talk about, if you could just drop in the chat why you want to move to Europe. I'm assuming if you're here, you're considering that. So what are some of your reasons for wanting to move? Find the chat, let me know there. There's no right or wrong reason. And I'm going to show some reasons here. Just wanted to see real quick if I could so I could just see the chat while I'm talking. Let me know what your reasons are. I don't think I have to sell you on Europe, but some of the reasons here are #1, I think better quality of life. And I hear people say that a lot. And in my experience, that has been very true for me. Location, I think you can't really beat the location of living in Europe because you have access to all the different countries that are so close by, right? And if you've traveled in Europe, or even if you haven't, you've probably heard of how much more affordable flights are, or you can take a train somewhere. And so, yeah, you really can, on the weekend, fly to Paris or go to Rome next weekend and do London the next one. So I think location is wonderful here. One thing I love is there's affordable healthcare here. So specifically for Americans, there may be some Canadians on the call, I'm not sure, but for Americans, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at how much less healthcare is here. I'm on a private plan and I pay 60 euros, so maybe like $65 a month for my healthcare. And last but not least, I mean, I'm not going to go into detail, but I think, it is safer. Not that I think, the stats show that it is safer over here than the US. And it's not necessarily that there is less crime, but, in Europe, the crime is much less likely to be violent than it is in the US. And they've, there's stats on that too. So these are just some of the reasons out there. And I'm seeing in the chat here of some of you echoing those reasons too. And I think another reason here is, in Europe, in a lot of countries, you have the opportunity, if you live there long enough, to get a second passport, which is attractive for those who want to live in Europe long term, or just want to have that opportunity. If you have a passport from a European country and that's in the EU, you have access to live and work in any of the 27 member states, which is pretty cool. A lot more reasons. We won't go into them here because this presentation is not about that. I think you guys have already dropped where you want to move. So let's talk about visas, okay? This is really the bulk of today's talk because, as I like to say, a move abroad is not easy. So if you see people out there saying how easy it is, I'd be wary about that. I always say a move abroad isn't easy, but it's very much possible. And so with a move abroad, everybody has obstacles, problems, things that they have to overcome. So don't let that hold you back or feel like I can't do this because everyone who has moved abroad has had to overcome an obstacle. And so we just have to have a solution-based mindset. We're just here trying to fix the problems. And for a lot of people, the visa is the #1 problem. So today I'm going to give you some options to resolve that. So #1, I want to talk about the countries in Europe where you don't need a visa, where you can literally just hop on a flight tonight and start living there tomorrow with zero paperwork. And there's two here. There's just two in Europe, and there's Albania and there's Georgia. Has anyone been to either of these countries? Let us know in the chat. Albania specifically for US citizens. Georgia is open to over 98 different countries who move there. And so that's literally it. You just move there. To stay in Albania, US citizens can stay there and live there and work remotely, visa-free for up to a year. After a year, you can do two things. You can apply for a residence permit, or you can just leave the country for 3 months and then come back and reset your time. In Georgia, you can also live there visa-free for up to a year. And then at 365 days, you just do a border run. That means you just have to leave the country and then you can come back in. So those are really easy options. Every country is different. So I do recommend people do scouting trips. Albania is not for everybody. Georgia is not for everybody. But I just want to give you options in case if you're I'm not seeing a visa that works for me, or if you're in a transitional period in your life and you just want to go somewhere where you can live very affordably, don't have to worry about the visa, and just give yourself some time to figure out what's next. These are two options. Okay? All right. And I see someone has both countries on their list. Wonderful. So let's talk about visas, though. Those were two countries you don't need a visa, but now let's talk about the different visas and some of the best countries for those. Now, there are a lot of different types of visas out there, but today I'm going to focus on the most viable visas. So these are visas that most people can qualify for one of these, okay? And so we're going to look at a student visa, the digital nomad visa that I've mentioned, a retirement visa, also known as a non-lucrative visa, freelance visas, and then I'm going to touch on briefly this highly skilled and labor shortage. This would be a type of work visa. Okay, work visas are very difficult to get in Europe, so I never suggest that should be your main route because for most people, you're not going to be able to get a work visa. But there are some types of work visas that some people may have a better chance at, and that would be in this category. So we'll look at that. So let's start with student visa. Has anybody studied abroad? Let me know in the chat. Student visas, I think, are great for a few reasons. These are probably some of the easiest visas to get if you want to move abroad. And a student visa allows you to either pursue a degree or you can take a language course, okay? Or maybe study something else. And this can be a degree, a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, or a PhD. I did my master's in Spain, and it was a one-year program. All right. And so the benefits of students' visas is one, obviously you're studying, right? You get to do that. It's much more affordable to do a program abroad, whether that is your bachelor's, master's, or PhD, much more affordable. You can find programs for as low as, I know a lot of people say free, but I think, more realistically, you're looking at paying maybe a few €100 a year or semester to maybe 1,000. So it's very affordable. And the third one, why I love a student visa, is because it's a great way to get your foot in the door. So if you really want to work in a certain country, how do most people find their jobs? Well, they do say 85% of people find work through their network. And so by doing a degree abroad, you give yourself that time to build your network, right? And so that's a big perk of this, because blasting resumes from the US really isn't going to get you anywhere if you're trying to get a job abroad. There's no guarantee that a student visa will lead to a job, but you do build your network. You can go on interviews, you can do internships, so you're already there in the system. And two things about a student visa is that you can work while you're there on a student visa. A lot of times once you graduate, most countries will allow you to extend your visa to look for work. And that can be anywhere from 6 months to 3 years, depending on the country. So you have that buffer time. But also, once you're in country, it's a lot easier to modify your visa. So if you have a student visa, it's a lot easier for a company to hire you if you're already in the country, right? Than if you were trying to get hired straight from the US. So there's a lot of benefits to student visas. Some things to just keep in mind with a student visa is, you will have to show when you apply that you can financially support yourself. So there are some financial requirements there. And you have to find a program that, you want to do and that you will get into, or you have to get accepted, right? And I probably should have mentioned that there are a lot of programs in Europe that are in English. So you don't have to do a program in German or in Spanish or in French. A lot of programs are in English because programs may be international. For instance, my degree was in international relations, and my class was with, students from 30 different countries. So the common language was English. Okay, so this is a student visa. Anyone interested in a student visa? Let me know in the chat if you're thinking like, oh, this might work for me. Let me know. All right. All right, let's talk about the second visa here. So if you don't want to go back to school and you want to work remotely, or you do work remotely, the digital nomad visa is the visa for you. So as I said, this is a relatively new visa. It's the first one was launched in 2020. That was Estonia who paved the way. And now there are, so many around the world. I would say in Europe, maybe there's about 15 now. Every year, new countries are launching their visa. Last year, Italy launched their visa. And then the year before that, I believe that was Spain. So, keep an eye on these. There's always something new coming out. Now, a digital nomad visa is for anyone who will be working remotely while living in country. So for instance, Portugal has a digital nomad visa. This would allow you to live in Portugal and work remotely for a company or clients that are outside of Portugal. All right, so this would be like you're bringing your remote job with you. Okay. So these visas are for freelancers, self-employed people, and if you're an employee, a remote employee. For these visas, there are financial requirements again here. So these are like some of the requirements you need. The financial requirements, it depends. You either need to have a monthly income from anywhere from about, I would say maybe $2,800 to about $4,500 a month to qualify, depending on the country. Okay. Some other things you have to show, you have to show proof of employment, or if it's your own company, you have to show, proof that you are the business owner. There's a few other things as well, but the main one is really that, excuse me, is the financial, sorry, the income, the monthly income. A second thing important to know, though, with digital nomad visas, most countries require US citizens to be 1099 employees or freelancers. You cannot be a W-2 employee in a lot of countries in Europe that offer the digital nomad visa. Okay, there may be some exceptions, but overall, if you're a W-2 employee, you probably won't qualify for this. So that means you either, if you really want to do this, need to talk to your employer about becoming a 1099 if that's an option, or you're going to have to find another job, and be a contractor. Okay, there's just some things to be aware of. Countries that offer these, this is a shortish list here. Italy, as I mentioned, Portugal, Spain, Croatia, Greece, Estonia, Malta, Hungary are some of the main ones. A lot of countries on the Mediterranean offer these. Not many countries in Northern Europe offer these types of visas, okay? Iceland does offer it, but it's only 6 months, and then you got to go. So one thing to note about digital nomad visas, some of these countries getting a digital nomad visa will lead to permanent residency or citizenship down the line. And some countries have limits, like Croatia, you will only be issued the digital nomad visa for a year. And then maybe you can extend it for a second year, but after that, you got to go. You can't stay, you can't extend, you can't modify. There's no path to staying longer. So that's just something to be aware of, depending on what your goal is, right? Do you just want to have a year-long sabbatical in Europe, or are you trying to really establish yourself there and stay long-term? Okay, digital nomad visa. Let me know in the chat who's like, maybe that's going to work for me. Maybe that's my way. All right, so let's look at the retirement visa here. So retirement visa doesn't necessarily mean you have to be retired. If you look at the woman here, she is, I guess she's maybe in her 30s, so she's not of retirement age. This is a visa that allows you to live in a country if you can show that you can financially support yourself without having to work. Okay, because with this visa, you are not allowed to work in country, and most times you're not even allowed to work remotely. This was a visa that I was on in Spain when you were able to work remotely on this visa. But then Spain's digital nomad visa was launched, and on this non-lucrative retirement visa, you can no longer work remotely on this. Okay, so this is pensioner, non-lucrative retirement. That's all the same visa we're talking about here. These are actually relatively easy to obtain as long as you meet those financial requirements. So the amount, again, is going to vary by country. For Spain, for instance, you would have to show that you have around 30,000 US dollars in savings or maybe passive income to qualify for this visa. Okay, so it'll depend by country, but anywhere from, you have to show maybe you have anywhere from 900 euros to, and I have it in euros here, so I didn't change these to dollars, but around 850 euros to about 4,500 euros a month in passive income, or what that is over a year in savings. Okay, that's for one person. With the digital nomad visa and this visa, you can add dependents. And if you add dependents, then you just have to show there'll be a higher financial threshold. Okay, it's not double, it's just going to be a small percentage. So with these visas, again, this is going to be for if you have savings, passive income, dividends, rental income. Usually that's what you need to qualify for this. Okay, countries that offer the retirement or the non-lucrative visa is going to be Spain, Portugal, France, Italy, Croatia, Greece, Austria, Poland, Bulgaria, and Malta. There's actually a few more. Switzerland and Ireland have this also. Okay. Just seeing if there's anything important else here that I need to mention. No? Okay. Yeah, that's it for the retirement visa. This is also a great visa if you just want to do a sabbatical. So I have someone who's one of my members who just moved to Spain on the non-lucrative visa. She quit her corporate job in the US from burnout and wanted to take a year off, her and her husband, and they came to Spain on the retirement or the non-lucrative visa. So they're not working, they've saved up money to enjoy this year. And then after a year, they can modify their visa. They can either renew the non-lucrative, or if they want to work, they can modify their visa to a different visa in Spain. So remember what I said when I talked about the student visa, once you're in country, it's much easier to modify your visa to a different one. okay, than if you were applying from the US. So that's something to keep in mind. All right. So let's keep it moving here. Freelance visa. So a freelance visa, this is different than a digital nomad visa because a freelance visa gives you the right to work with clients in country. So this is where you're self-employed, but you can work with clients in France. If you're moving to France, you can have French clients and you can have clients anywhere in the world. All right. Because remember, with the digital nomad visa, you're not allowed to work with local clients, and everything has to be, that your income has to be derived from outside the country. So this is a visa where, you could have two clients in France, but maybe most of your clients are coming from outside of France. That's totally okay. I would say the only tricky part of this visa is that when you apply for it, you do have to show that you have one or two people, maybe if you don't have clients yet, if you're living in the US, you don't have clients in France, that's pretty normal, right? If you're not doing business there. If you were to apply for this, you would have to show that there are at least two clients that intend to work with you. And there's different ways that you can go about doing this. Some of the countries that offer these are France, as I've mentioned. Germany has a very popular one, specifically for Berlin. A lot of people go to Berlin on this type of freelance visa. Italy has one. It's very hard to get. The Czech Republic, a lot of people go to the Czech Republic on this. And then the Netherlands has a very special one that I think is really great for anyone who is a freelancer, who has their own business, or is even thinking of maybe becoming a freelancer or starting their own business. The Netherlands has something that's called the DAFT visa, D-A-F-T, and it's specifically for US citizens. Very low barriers to entry. You just have to register a business there and put 4,500 euros in a bank account. And voila, you pretty much have a visa to go live in the Netherlands. So that's an option there. Okay. All right. So last one here, and I won't spend too much time here because I think this is the hardest one to get. A highly skilled or labor shortage visa is basically a very specific type of work visa. This is if you want to move to the UK and work, and get a work visa sponsorship. This is going to be for people who are considered by that country highly skilled, or someone who has a skill where that country has a labor shortage. Okay. And just real quick, the reason why it's so hard to get a job, get a work visa sponsorship abroad is because countries protect local labor. I mean, the US does this too, right? So they're always going to look to see who within the country, or if we're talking about the European Union, who within the European Union can do that job. If they have to, a company would have to prove there's nobody qualified to do the job out of like 330 million people to justify hiring you. So that's why it's so difficult. But with highly skilled visas and labor shortage, this is kind of like a fast track. A company doesn't have to justify why they're hiring you. You have the skills, you can do the job, and it's very quick and easy for them to hire you. So some countries that have this are the UK that I mentioned, Ireland, Germany, the Netherlands, France. Those are kind of the main ones. Switzerland, Denmark, Finland. And highly qualified, it's going to depend on the country, what that means, but generally that's going to be tech, management, the sciences, research, engineering, those kind of jobs. But also labor shortages. I've seen, in the UK, look, these lists always change, but I've seen them looking for carpenters, for florists. So it could be also other types of roles too. Okay, so that was a lot about visas. I mean, I could talk about visas for days, but we don't have time here for that. But I just wanted to give you an overview of the many different options that you have, okay? Again, just want to stress there's no one way to do this. People often ask me, what is the easiest country to move to? And this kind of covers some of the countries that we looked at, or most of them. The ones in green here are going to be the easier ones. Starting with Albania and Georgia. Again, they're easy because you don't need a visa. You don't need paperwork to move there as a US citizen. Probably next easiest are going to be those digital nomad visas. So if you have a remote job, or if you can get a remote job, it's going to be pretty easy to get a digital nomad visa. And I would say also a retirement visa, but I feel like a lot of people may be still needing to work. So didn't mention that one here. Easiest countries, Spain and Portugal are popular, not just for the sunshine, but also because it's two of the easiest countries in Europe to get a visa. Netherlands and Germany, they have a few options. As I mentioned, the DAFT visa, freelance visa, and also highly qualified visas. And then hate to break it to you, but for those who are like, I want to move to the UK, I want to move to Nordic countries, those are just really hard. And I tell people, we need to be realistic, we need to be optimistic, but we also need to be realistic. If there's not a visa option that you're going to qualify for here, I would say move on to a different one, right? Because if you want to move abroad, you need to be realistic about what your options are. Okay, now some things to consider. I don't have enough time to go deep into these, but I just want you to know, like beyond the visa, other things to think about is, work, like where are you going to make an income? Where's your money coming from? If you're living off savings, crunch the numbers to make sure you have what you need. Health insurance isn't a blocker, so it'll be affordable, I think, wherever you're going if you're coming from the US. Taxes, I think people don't talk about enough, and I'll touch on that real quick in a minute. Climate, just, I would say visit your target country in the season you enjoy the least to see if it's comfortable for you. Because a lot of people are like, oh, I did Italy in the summer and I loved it. Okay, but maybe go to in the dead of winter and see if your target city is a place that you really enjoy. This happens a lot with Portugal. People don't know Portugal in the winter. Portugal's on the Atlantic, the Atlantic Ocean is there. Very wet and cold, not very pleasant winters, okay? Language and culture, is it a language you want to learn? Is the culture, does that work for you? And then the housing crisis, which is something I think that is worth talking about. Housing crisis is happening in the US, and I'm going to touch on this very briefly. It's happening in Europe too. And you've probably seen some reports of like tourists. There's a backlash against tourism. There's a lot happening here in terms of not having enough affordable housing for people. Lots of places to point the finger. I think, it's always easiest to point, outsiders. But I think tourists and Airbnbs are a big problem here. So I do tell people, I mean, you can do what you want with your money, but if you're looking to make if you're looking to buy an investment property, maybe, just think twice about where you're buying. And if you're going to be contributing to what's happening there. I think it's different if you're buying a place to live in, but a lot of cities have just really changed because of this. But people always ask, are we welcome there to move abroad? Are we not? I think you're very much welcome in many places, but just it's good to be aware of what's going on. But tourists and people moving there aren't the only problem with the housing crisis. A lot of things are at the government level of everything from the same problems are happening in the US. There's not enough new housing being built, corporate investment, all kinds of things are happening that locals are struggling to find affordable housing. Other things to think about or know about, I mentioned health insurance. Again, depending which country you're moving to, most likely you're going to need private health insurance at first, and maybe eventually you'll be able to get on the public system. I've mentioned that it's very affordable to get health insurance abroad. Even with pre-existing conditions, you can still find private plans that'll cover you. And then taxes, just want to spend just a little time here real quick because people always ask. So as you may be aware, US citizens are, I think, one of two countries or two citizens in the world that have to continue to file their taxes even when they live abroad. This doesn't mean that you have to pay, but you do have to file. Like I live in Spain, but I still have to file in the US every year. Will you need to pay taxes? It just depends on your situation. Depends if you're considered a tax resident and maybe a few different factors. So I would talk to an expert, expat tax expert. Your accountant now is not going to know. So definitely talk to someone who works with expat taxes. How much you need to pay is going to depend on your situation, what tax bracket you're in, all kinds of things. But there's a lot of information out there. I particularly love, and we work with Bright Tax, and they have a lot of great information on their website for specific countries. Okay, Bright Tax. All right, so I think we'll go into the Q&A. I do want to share again, I mentioned this at the beginning, that I wrote a visa guide to Europe. So if you're maybe not sure what country you want to move to or need more information about any of the visas I mentioned, I did write a book that covers the 19 easiest, maybe I should say easier countries to move to in Europe based on over 50 visa options. So there's over 50 visa options there. This is a digital book. It's digital because I update it every year. Actually updating it right now, and the new version comes out next week. And when you purchase this, you get lifetime access. So if you bought this book 2 years ago, you've had the update from the last 2 years, and you'll get this one. If you buy it now, you'll get next year's update. So I think it's great for people who know they want to move abroad, or even for people who aren't sure yet, but want to see what their options are. This year I added Albania to the book. We've updated with it's Italy's new digital nomad visa. We made a lot more updates in there. All right. Let's see here. I'm just gonna have my info here, and I see they dropped it in the chat, and I think we can move into Q&A. If you
Oh,
scan, oh, sorry.
oh my gosh, Cepee, that was amazing. There's so much
Thank you.
information. And I don't know if you could tell, but there were questions flying. So
Yeah.
buckle in. Here we go. So general questions. We've kind of got to categorize for each category. So everybody hang tight. So Ty asked, which one of these visa options do you see becoming harder for Americans looking to move to Europe under this new administration?
Yes. Well, I didn't mention today the golden visa, the investment visa that people may be familiar with. I didn't mention that because for a lot of people financially, it may not be viable. With a golden visa, that's where if you buy property abroad, you will get, people think it gives you citizenship. It actually gives you a visa, and then you can live there for X amount of time and then apply. Portugal ended their golden visa program, or they restructured it to where investing in a property doesn't count anymore. They did that last year, and Spain's golden visa program is ending this April. So I don't know, but wouldn't be surprised if other countries are going to follow suit. And this is in reference, governments are saying this is because of the housing crisis. They're going to kind of stop foreigners from buying, for getting benefits from purchasing property here. So that's going to change. Digital nomad visas, it's hard to say. Right now, digital nomad visas are still popping up. But that is something that we never know that could change. And I think this is a great question to remind people, like, if you want to move abroad, why wait? What are we waiting for? These visas come and go. These visas aren't etched in stone. So, if you wait too long, it may not be an option for you anymore.
Gotcha. Okay. Next question. Paula asked, what are some great resources to find employment?
Yes, great resources to look for employment. Was that it? Okay.
Yes.
For employment are, okay, so if you're looking for remote work, some sites that I love are We Work Remotely. And actually, I'm going to drop this in the chat. I actually have a list of 25 work from anywhere companies. So for anyone who is interested in that, let me drop it here. Another website I love is called Remote Rebellion. And another one is EU Jobs. EU Jobs. Those are for remote work. When you're looking for remote work, number one thing to do is to target work from anywhere companies. There's no use in targeting companies who aren't remote first and don't work remotely as a practice across the board. So that link I just shared is a list of 25 companies that do that, because those are companies that will let you do that. If you're looking for work abroad, so if you want to get hired in Germany, if you're looking to get a job in the UK, it's hard. There really isn't a website you can go to that's going to help. I mean, LinkedIn, obviously, but I think better options, honestly, is if you have the time and the luxury and the money to do that, go to that country, go to England, go to London for 2-3 months and go on interviews. Like, you really need to be there to see success. It's very, very hard to do that from abroad and just apply online. I do want to mention, I think, about the Scan Me here. I think there was a question about that. So if you scan this will just lead you to my links here, just in case if that's easier for people to scan, you can get to my website and stuff. Okay.
Gotcha. Okay, now I've got a list of some student visa questions for you. Emily asked, if you are going abroad with a spouse, would you both need to be taking classes to get that student visa?
No, often with student visas, you can also have a dependent come with you. So in that case, they wouldn't have to take classes. I believe you would just have to show, there are financial requirements with a student visa. So you probably have to show a little bit more, showing that your spouse is financially supported while they're there with you.
Amazing.
And
Okay.
in some countries, I do want to add, this is really weird. I think Spain is like this. In some countries, when you bring a dependent on a student visa, while you may not be able to have the right to work full time, your partner can. Like, they're able to work in Spain and apply for jobs.
Nice. Okay. And Melissa asked, can I do a student visa to study my host country's language? Sounds like it could be like a foot in the door to do something like that.
Great. Okay, there we go. Definitely. You can definitely study a language. You can study a language at a language academy. That's what a lot of people do. Or you can study a language at a university. And, if you're just coming to most countries for 3 months, you don't need a visa. But if you want to stay longer, you'll need one. I will say Italy is a little tricky, though. Italy is making it harder for people to get approved for language visas, especially at the lower level. We have seen that change happening.
Nice. Okay. All right. A couple digital nomad questions for you. Ben asked, is there a minimum bank account balance for a digital nomad visa? And do you need to show that you've
No, usually, so the income requirement is going to be, the financial requirement is going to be your income. So what you're making, you do have to show when you apply, depending on the country, you do have to show bank statements from the last 3 to 6 months. So they want to see that that is actual real income coming in. So that's something to note. You don't need to have savings, but in some cases, let's say you are 2, 3, 4, 500 euros short of the financial requirement. Often countries will let you supplement that with savings. So you can show, I have the extra 500, but usually it's going to be a small portion. It can't be, $2,000 in savings to make up
Right.
what you're missing.
Fascinating. Okay. Okay. Emily and Rebecca asked, what countries offer digital nomad for W-2 employees? Do you know?
It's really hard. I don't think any really do. I have seen some, like in Spain, they don't, but I've seen a handful of cases where people have been able to get it. For the most part, in Europe, I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's possible.
Okay, okay. All right. We have a specific one from Alex. He's saying that he's a UX UI design with 8 years of experience. If he's a 1099 employee through a US company, what would be the steps to move to Switzerland or Spain? Any ideas?
Yes, great question. Okay, so Switzerland, you wouldn't be able to move there with a remote job. Switzerland doesn't have a digital nomad visa. They do have a highly qualified visa, like work visa, but it's very hard to get. They have very small quotas. So Switzerland are really looking for like finance, banking, that and executives. But
Mhm.
Spain, the digital nomad visa is a great option. So since you're 1099, great. So two things. You need to talk to your employer and see if they would allow you, like if they're okay with you working from Spain. And if they are, that's pretty much it. You can, you can go on the Spanish consulate for where you're located and look at the requirements and apply. It's pretty easy. Once you have the job, the digital nomad job, and if your employer is okay with it, you're good to go.
Perfect. I've got a few retirement visa questions now. Teresa asked, is there a limit on how long you could live in a country under the retirement visa?
Not that I know of. So how the retirement visas work are generally you're issued the initial visa for 1 year, and then at your 1 year mark, you will renew the visa. And to renew the visa, there will be some requirements. So sometimes you'll have to, show savings again that you can support yourself. And typically you're issued the renewal for another 2 years and maybe another 2 years. So then you're at 5 years. Usually in Europe, when you get to 5 years, in most countries, you can then apply for like permanent residency. But some countries are an exception. So Portugal, you are eligible to apply for citizenship after 5 years if you meet the requirements, right? Germany too. Germany doesn't have a retirement visa, but Germany is one of those countries where in 5 years you're eligible to apply. So that's just something to note of. But there's really, yeah, once you're there on a retirement visa, you can stay as long as you meet the requirements.
Amazing. Great. Okay. Oh, another question. Can you do any type of work on a retirement visa?
You're not supposed to. So most countries, the retirement, they also call it a non-lucrative. And that just means you're not supposed to be participating in lucrative activities. You
Mhm.
could maybe have rental income, dividends. You're not really supposed to work. Some countries, it's a gray area. And I would say that's, technically you're not supposed to work, but in practice, I would say there are some people who are working, not some, there are people working remotely
Mhm.
on retirement visas. So that's up to you. But technically you're not supposed to.
Gotcha. Okay. And if you are retired, can you still get into the healthcare system?
Yes. So if you come on a retirement visa, most often you're going to have to get private health care, at least in the beginning. And you can find private providers. You may have to work. So some of the limitations, maybe if you have certain pre-existing conditions, if you're over 75, doesn't mean that you can't find health insurance, but you may have to work with an insurance broker who can help you find a policy. And you may have to pay a little bit more or pay more than, somebody who, could get a plan at a regular rate, but that won't hold you back. And then at some point, you will probably, most likely, especially if you've been in a country for 5 years, once you're a permanent resident, you will have access to the public system, and public systems can't deny you for anything. Um, yeah, they
Great.
have, they have to, they have to take care of you.
Amazing. Would Social Security income count towards passive income for retirement visas?
It does. Yeah, it does.
Okay, perfect.
Mhm.
All right. Okay. Joanne asked if we could pursue any of these visas, what should we keep in mind when it comes to paying taxes, opening bank accounts abroad, etc.?
I love that. So taxes, number one is you need to see if you are considered a tax resident. For most countries, you're considered a tax resident if you live there for more than 183 days. Okay. Another thing to note, for most of these visas, to renew the visa, you have to have been in the country for more than 183 days. So most likely, if you're going to live abroad, then you're probably going to be a tax resident. Another thing to understand about taxes is find out if the country you're moving to, if there's a tax treaty with the US. Okay. US has tax treaties with a lot of countries. They have one with Spain, with France, many countries. And this just means that you're not going to be double taxed. So for instance, for me, again, I have to file taxes in both countries, but I don't pay them both. Usually what happens, if the US has a tax treaty with a country, I will pay in Spain because I live here. Usually taxes are going to be higher in Europe. For most people, if you're coming from a high tax state, then it may just shake out evenly. But I'll pay taxes in Spain and I'll use what I paid here as a credit to my US taxes. Okay, that's usually how it works. So that's something to keep in mind. Also keep in mind, if you're retiring, you need to see if some of your assets, your investments are taxable or not. So that's something to really look into. And you would do that by I would talk to an expat tax expert or even a financial advisor about those things. Okay, again, Bright Tax, I love them and can't recommend them enough. Oh, Lisa, you're on mute.
I was trying to be respectful. Darn it.
Mhm.
So Ben has asked, do you think project management and having a PMP certificate would help as a dual citizen there to find a job potentially?
Yes, I see a lot of project management roles. So I have a membership community where we help women who are actively working on a move abroad, and we have a job board. And I'm always, when I'm looking for the jobs every week, what's out there, I see a lot of project management out there. So I think that is great.
Mhm.
Another thing to remember is, I'm not sure which country you're interested in, but if you are a dual citizen, great. Actually, you don't need to worry about anything. You're a dual citizen. I was going to say the language, if you have the skills and you're not a dual citizen, if you don't speak the local language, it can be challenging. But you're a dual citizen, so that's great.
Nice, great. All right. Kate asked, how long can you be in the UK without a visa?
Yes, so US citizens can be in the UK for 6 months, up to 6 months without a visa, which is wild. I actually didn't know that until a few years ago. I wish I would have known that when I was younger. I would have been hanging out in the UK. But if you have been to the UK, you've probably noticed their border control is they're pretty strict, and they can make you feel very guilty, like you're being interrogated. So some things to know: if you are going to go for 6 months and you're working remotely, my advice is do not say you're working remotely, because they may not let you into the country. Okay, just something to note.
Gotcha. Okay. Paula has asked, if I have my EU passport, are there any recommendations for places to move? She doesn't speak any languages fluently, but willing to learn if it suits.
Congratulations, Paula. That's so great when you have the passport here. I think, this is where you got to think about what kind of lifestyle you want, and how do you want to live? Where do you want to live? What are your preferences? Do you like hot climates, cold climates? Do you like countries that are more laid back, like the Mediterranean? Or do you like more structured cultures and countries like maybe Northern Europe? Cost of living is another thing to look at. And the language factor. I mean, you don't need to know the local language to move abroad. That's something you can learn. So I wouldn't let that hold you back. But I would say, people love Spain and Portugal if you're into warmer weather and very warm cultures. But some people, the lifestyle here does work on a different time and clock, right? Pace. In Spain, we are eating lunch between 2 and 4, and we're having dinner between 8 and 10. And for everybody, that's like, I can't adjust to that. So maybe a Germany or the Netherlands, maybe a culture that in some ways is closer to the US might feel like a better fit. So one bit of advice is, where you start isn't where you have to stay. So I think we can release ourselves of like, I have to make the right decision and it has, Spain has to work out. Like you can start in Spain, feel it out. And then after 6 months, a year, however long, if that wasn't a good fit, once you've moved abroad once, the second time is even easier. So you can move to Portugal next or Germany or Italy. So we can release ourselves of having to make like the perfect decision, right?
That is a really important detail. That's wonderful because I think it's really easy to get bogged down and worry about that specific, the perfect answer. So that's
Yeah.
wonderful. Um, Becca asked a question. Are there ways to invest in businesses as a way to get a visa?
Yes. Oh, great question. Yeah. So I mentioned the golden visa. So the golden visa, in some countries, you can still invest in property, like Greece has a golden visa. You can invest there. But many of these countries, so Greece, Spain, Portugal, I'm trying to think which other golden countries, but those are the main ones. You can invest in institutions, you can invest in companies, you can invest, there's different ways you can invest. So in my book, I go into those different ways, but you can also Google online if you want to look Greece Golden Visa investments, and you'll find information on what those numbers are. Usually it's more. So let's say, for example, in Spain or in Portugal, property investment was anywhere from 250,000 to 500,000 euros in cash, no mortgage for property. But to invest in other ways, then it goes up. It goes up to, like 1 million, they're going to be high figures for investing other ways.
Gotcha. Are there any formal expat communities or organizations that you recommend getting involved in?
Yes, I love this. Yes, so I have mine, She Hit Refresh. That's for women over 30. But also some other great ones out there. One of my favorites is Girl Gone International. They have chapters in cities all over the world. This one's just for women. I'll give a few that are, not limited to just women, but Girl Gone International. Look for, if you go into Facebook, go Girl International, and then the city you want to move to, there's probably a chapter out there for you. And then if you just also, and I know a lot of people don't want to be on Facebook, but Facebook is such a great resource for these expat communities. So in their groups, so if you just do like expats in Amsterdam, Americans in Paris, you're going to find Facebook groups, and those are great to get information and connect with other people who have already done the thing that you want to do.
Okay. One question about a student visa. Can you work while you're in Europe on a student visa?
In most countries, you can. So your work may be limited. So in some countries, maybe you can only work 20 hours a week. Some maybe you can work full time, or maybe you can work full time during the summer, but only 20 during the school year. But typically, you can work on a student visa.
Okay. All right, great. Lindsay asked, I was going to ask how to establish residency as well to get the EU visa for the Schengen area.
Yes. So to establish residency, you will need to get a visa for the country that you want to live in. So if you're going to Italy, you need to get a visa to live in Italy. And then once you're in Italy, just like any country, once you get the visa for that country, when you move to that country, there's a second step. There's a second step of paperwork. So the first step is like in your home country, applying to the consulate and getting your visa. You move abroad with that visa. And once you're abroad, then you have to apply for your permit. The permit is what lets you live in that country. The visa just gets you in and allows you to apply for the permit. Okay, so it's kind of two steps. So you apply for your permit. Once you have your permit, then you are able to live there. So that's what you would need to do. To establish residency, you have to have the permit. And to get the permit, you have to have an address. So that means you're going to have an apartment or buy a place abroad. Those are the two main requirements for residency.
Okay, okay. Ernie asked, I have a US and EU passport, but my partner has only a US passport. How can we move and establish residency somewhere in the EU that's not my EU passport country?
Yeah, that's okay. Ooh, spouses of EU citizens have a big perk. So your spouse can move with you. So you just need to check if there's any special paperwork you need to do, but often you can move to that country together, and in the country, then you would, kind of register your spouse there. You have to probably file your marriage certificate or get that translated. You have to, prove they're your spouse, and then they will get residency. Like it's like called like a spousal visa, basically. So they would get residency in any of the EU countries because you are an EU citizen.
Gotcha.
So just, yeah, look at the country you want to move to and just see if there's anything special you need to do before you go. But
Mhm.
often what you need to do happens after you get there.
Okay, good. And along those same lines, do EU countries have their own passport or is it for all of the EU?
Yes, yes, because people often say like, oh, I want to get an EU passport. So each country has its own passport. So for instance, I have a Spanish passport, so it's issued by Spain. But that passport lets me live in any of the 27, live and work in any of the 27 member states. So there is not like an EU passport and a country passport. You just get the country passport, but that gives you access to the other countries.
Gotcha. Okay. And Heidi said, do you know what the investment is for the Golden Visa in Spain? Are you accepting, and also are you accepting new members to Refreshers Lounge?
Oh, thanks, Heidi. Yeah, so right now, so Spain's golden visa is due to end April 3rd. That date could get pushed back. We don't know, like get pushed, further down the line. So you can still apply. You actually can still qualify for Spain's investment visa. The financial requirement starts at property investment 500,000 euros in cash. So it can't be financed. And that can be, that could be two properties, that could be one property, like you can divide it how you want, but it has to equal 500,000.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Oh, and the lounge, yes, you asked about the lounge. Right now we have a wait list, but please get on the wait list. When doors open, we will let you know. Probably doors are going to open in April next.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. One last question because I know we're getting close on time. Ernie asked, can you move around and travel in and out of the country and EU zone once you've established residency? Is there a no travel period?
No. So once you're in the country, I would say wait until you get your permit. Like I said, once you get abroad, you have to apply for your permit. So I would get my permit, and that, can take anywhere from, a few weeks to a few months. Once you have that permit, then you're free to travel. You still are restricted to your 90 days in the Schengen. So just because you're allowed to live in Spain doesn't mean you can go to, France for 6 months. You could, because, in Europe, there's open borders, so nobody's checking, when you fly. When I fly from Spain to France, I'm not showing a passport. Nobody's looking at identification, so you're not getting stamped. So no one would know. But the tricky part is when it comes to when you have to renew your visa, you do have to show proof that you were in the country, for a certain amount of time. So if you were in France for too long, you may not be able to renew your visa. Okay, I hope that helps.
Perfect. Oh my gosh, Cepee, you are amazing. There are so many more questions. I know the juices are flowing. People have so many things they want to ask. Everyone, please check into the chat. You can see all of the ways that you can follow Cepee, that you can gather that much more information from her. She is a wealth of knowledge, obviously. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. So let's talk now. We've got some other upcoming events in the next few weeks. Funny thing, the next one is all about Greece, and it's hosted by me. Greece is one of my favorite places on the planet, and I will be talking about my favorite things about it and some ways to really make the most of your visit when you go. As a side note, we also have a Greece tour that we are hosting in September. You are welcome to join us. Then we've also got our February community happy hour, where people come together and get to know each other and chat. It's a wonderful opportunity that we do every single month. And then we've got another event coming up called Beyond Selfie Stick Tourism, tips on how to travel deeper. So, like I said, we've got some incredible tours coming up this year. India and Vietnam are coming up in March, and they are filled, and we are looking forward to those. Then later in the year, we've got Greece, Peru, and Morocco. And actually, at this moment, we are currently in the trenches trying to figure out exactly where we will be going in 2026. And in the recap email that we send all of you with a link to this event, we'll send you a survey because we really want to know where you want to go in 26. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. This has been an incredible event, and we are honored to have you here. And Cepee, thank you so very much for your time.
Yes, I just want to say thank you to everybody who joined today. I had so much fun, and thank you, Lisa and Laura, for inviting me on. This was great. So thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much.